The bullet grazed Lucas Dawson's shoulder just as the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada, and he knew without looking that the men chasing him would not stop until either he was dead or they were. He pressed his heels into his horse's flanks, urging the exhausted animal forward through the pines and brush of Northern California, blood seeping warm through his shirt. The year was 1876, and Lucas had made the mistake of witnessing something he should not have seen in a saloon back in Eureka 3 days ago. A crooked land deal between the territorial marshal and a railroad baron that would displace dozens of families. Now those same men wanted to ensure his silence permanently. His horse stumbled on loose rock, and Lucas felt the animal's strength failing. He had pushed the bay gelding too hard for too long, and guilt mixed with his desperation as he searched the darkening landscape for anywhere to take cover. The forest grew thicker here, wilder, and he could hear the distant rush of water somewhere below. His pursuers' voices echoed through the trees behind him, growing closer with each passing moment. Then his horse went down completely, front legs buckling as exhaustion finally claimed it. Lucas rolled clear just in time, hitting the ground hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through his injured shoulder, and for a moment the world spun sickeningly. He lay there gasping, hearing the shouts of the men hunting him drawing nearer. The horse struggled to rise, failed, and Lucas felt his heart sink. The animal would recover with rest, but Lucas had no time to give it. He grabbed his rifle from the saddle's scabbard and his canteen, leaving everything else behind as he stumbled down the slope toward the sound of water. Darkness was falling fast now, which might be his only advantage. The voices behind him grew louder, and then a shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a pine tree inches from his head. Lucas ran, ignoring the pain in his shoulder and the burning in his lungs, crashing through undergrowth without caring about the noise. The ground disappeared beneath his feet without warning. He fell, rolling and sliding down a steep embankment in a cascade of loose dirt and stones. His rifle went flying. He caught a brief glimpse of firelight below before he hit the bottom hard, consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. When awareness returned, he found himself staring up at a face that seemed to emerge from the darkness itself. A woman knelt beside him, her features sharp and beautiful in the firelight, long black hair falling past her shoulders. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a deerskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork, and her dark eyes studied him with an intensity that was both wary and curious. Her hand rested on a knife at her belt. Lucas tried to speak, to warn her about the men who were hunting him, but only a groan emerged. The woman's expression shifted slightly, and she called out something in a language he did not understand. 2 other figures appeared from the shadows, an older woman and a young boy, both Apache. They spoke rapidly among themselves, and Lucas caught the tension in their voices even if he could not comprehend the words. The younger woman, the one kneeling beside him, made what seemed to be a decision. She spoke firmly to the others, then turned her attention back to Lucas. She examined his wounded shoulder with practiced hands, and he hissed in pain as she probed the injury. Her fingers were gentle but efficient, and she nodded to herself before speaking words he could not understand but whose meaning seemed clear enough. She would help him. Above them, on the ridge where Lucas had fallen, voices shouted. The woman's head snapped up, her body tensing. She barked an order to the older woman and the boy, who immediately began dousing the fire and gathering their belongings. Then she gripped Lucas under his good arm and hauled him up with surprising strength for someone so much smaller than him. He stood maybe 6 feet tall and was solidly built from years of ranch work, but she moved him as if he weighed nothing. They half carried, half dragged him away from the small camp, deeper into the forest. Lucas tried to help, to make his legs work properly, but his vision kept blurring and his coordination was shot. The woman supporting him never faltered, never complained, just kept moving with sure-footed confidence through terrain that Lucas could barely see. Behind them, he heard the men reach the abandoned camp, heard their angry shouts when they found it empty. They traveled for what felt like hours but was probably less. The landscape changed, becoming rockier, and then they were moving through a narrow crevice between two large boulders. The space opened up into a small cave, invisible from outside unless you knew exactly where to look. The older woman and boy were already there, having taken a different route, and they had a small fire going in a spot where the smoke would dissipate through cracks in the rock ceiling. The younger woman lowered Lucas to the ground near the fire, propping him against the cave wall. She spoke to the older woman, who brought her what looked like a medicine bundle. Then she turned her attention fully to Lucas, pulling a knife from her belt. He flinched instinctively, but she simply cut away his shirt to expose the bullet wound properly. Up close, with better light, Lucas could see her more clearly. She was perhaps 20 or 21 years old, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline that spoke of both beauty and determination. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had tended wounds before, cleaning the injury with water from a leather pouch, then applying what looked like a poultice made from crushed herbs. The pain was sharp and immediate, but then it began to fade to a dull ache as whatever medicine she used took effect. She bound the wound with strips of clean cloth, her movements efficient and practiced. When she finished, she sat back and studied him with those intense dark eyes. Lucas managed to find his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Thank you," he said. "Those men, they will keep looking for me. I do not want to bring trouble to you and your family." She tilted her head slightly, and he realized she might not speak English. But then she surprised him by responding in accented but clear words. "They will not find this place. We are safe here." Her voice was low and melodic, and hearing her speak sent an unexpected warmth through Lucas's chest that had nothing to do with the fire or his injury. He nodded slowly, relief washing over him. "I am Lucas," he said. "Lucas Dawson." She regarded him for a long moment before responding. "I am Benina Solace. This is my grandmother, Dawson, and my cousin, Keel." The older woman nodded at the mention of her name, her weathered face impassive. The boy, who looked to be perhaps 10 years old, watched Lucas with unconcealed curiosity. Benina said something to them in Apache, and Dawson began preparing what looked like a simple meal from their supplies. "Why do those men hunt you?" Benina asked, turning back to Lucas. He hesitated, unsure how much to explain, but these people had saved his life and deserved the truth. "I saw something I was not supposed to see. A corrupt marshal making a deal that will hurt a lot of people. He wants to make sure I cannot tell anyone about it." Benina's expression darkened. "The marshal from Ireka," Lucas nodded, surprised she knew the town. "You know him." "I know of him," she said, her voice tight with an emotion Lucas could not quite identify. "He has helped drive my people from lands that were promised to us. He works with the men who want our territory for their railroads and their cattle." Understanding dawned on Lucas. The very land deal he had witnessed was likely part of the same pattern of displacement Benina was describing. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "What I saw, it was documents about land along the Klamath River. They mean to claim it belongs to the railroad, regardless of who actually lives there." Benina's jaw tightened, but she only nodded. "Rest now. We will talk more when you have recovered some strength." Dawson brought him a wooden bowl containing some kind of stew made with dried meat and roots. It was simple but flavorful, and Lucas realized he had not eaten since the previous morning. He ate slowly, aware of 3 pairs of eyes watching him. Young Keel finally could not contain his curiosity any longer and spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing at Lucas. Benina's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "He wants to know if you are a good shot with that rifle you lost." Lucas managed a weak smile in return. "Good enough, most days. Not so good when I am running for my life in the dark." Keel seemed satisfied with this answer when Benina translated. The boy retrieved something from the supplies and brought it to Benina, speaking earnestly to her. She responded with gentle firmness, clearly telling him no, but the boy persisted. Finally, she sighed and took what he was offering, a bundle of folded cloth or leather. "My cousin says that you will be cold tonight," Benina explained. "The cave stays cool even with the fire. This is." She paused, searching for the English word, "a blanket. He wants you to have it, but I told him we need it ourselves." Lucas shook his head quickly. "He is right to keep it. I have been colder than this before. I will manage." But even as he said it, a shiver ran through him. The adrenaline from his flight was wearing off, and shock was setting in. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the empty bowl. Benina noticed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She spoke again to Keel in Apache, her tone brooking no argument this time, but then she stood and moved to another bundle of their belongings. She returned with a different blanket, this one clearly older and more worn than the first. But as she unfolded it, Lucas could see it was still beautifully made, woven with patterns that seemed to tell a story he did not know how to read. The colors were earth tones, browns and reds and creams, arranged in geometric designs that were both simple and complex. "This one I made myself 2 winters ago," Benina said, her voice softer than before. "It is strong and warm. You may use it." She draped it over his shoulders before he could protest, and the warmth was immediate and welcome. The blanket smelled faintly of sage and wood smoke, and the wool was softer than he expected. Lucas pulled it closer around himself, meeting Benina's eyes. "Thank you," he said, and meant it more deeply than she probably knew. "For everything. The medicine, the food, the shelter. I owe you my life." She shook her head slightly. "Life is not a debt. You needed help and we could give it. That is enough." But Lucas saw something in her eyes that suggested it was not quite that simple, that there was a reason she had chosen to help a fleeing white man when her people had every reason to distrust his kind. He wanted to ask, to understand, but exhaustion was pulling at him now, the warmth of the blanket and the fire making it impossible to keep his eyes open. He woke several times during the night, once to find Benina sitting near the cave entrance keeping watch, her profile outlined in the dim glow of the banked fire. Another time he heard voices outside, the men who were hunting him passing somewhere nearby, and he tensed until Benina appeared beside him, placing a gentle hand on his good shoulder and shaking her head slightly. "Be still, be quiet." The voices faded and Lucas drifted back to sleep. When dawn light began filtering into the cave, Lucas woke to find his shoulder stiff and painful but not unbearable. The poultice Benina had applied had worked remarkably well. He could move the arm, though not without discomfort. Gallion was tending the fire, and young Keel was still asleep in his own blanket near the back of the cave. Benina entered from outside, carrying Lucas's rifle. She had cleaned it, he noticed immediately, removing the dirt and debris from his fall. She handed it to him without comment, then knelt to check his shoulder. Her fingers were cool against his skin as she unwrapped the bandage and examined the wound. "It is healing well," she said. "No infection. You were fortunate. The bullet passed through without hitting bone or major vessels." "Thanks to your quick treatment," Lucas replied. He watched her face as she worked, struck again by her beauty but also by the quiet competence she radiated. "Where did you learn medicine?" "My grandmother taught me," Benina said, nodding toward Gallion. "She learned from her mother, and she from hers. It is our way to pass knowledge through the women of the family." She applied fresh poultice and rewrapped the wound with clean bandages. When she finished, she sat back and regarded him seriously. "The men who hunt you, they did not find our trail last night, but they will not give up easily. A corrupt man with power is dangerous." Lucas nodded grimly. "I know, which is why I need to get word to someone who can do something about what I saw. There is a federal marshal, an honest one who sometimes comes through Eureka. If I could reach him, tell him what I witnessed, he might be able to investigate." "And if you cannot reach him?" Benina asked. "If the territorial marshal finds you first?" The unspoken implication hung in the air between them. Lucas met her gaze steadily. "Then I will likely die. But better that than let those Meng continue to destroy lives and steal land with no consequences." Something shifted in Benina's expression, a respect that had not been there before. She studied him for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "My grandmother and cousin will stay here, where it is safe. I will guide you to Eureka by a route the marshal's men will not expect. It will take longer, but it will be safer." Lucas started to shake his head. "I cannot ask you to risk yourself for me. You have already done more than enough." "You did not ask," Benina replied firmly. "I offered, and I have my own reasons for wanting to see that marshal's corruption exposed. His actions have harmed my people. If you can bring him to justice, then helping you helps us as well." She spoke rapidly to Gallion in Apache, and the older woman responded with what sounded like concern. A brief but intense conversation followed, with Gallion clearly expressing reservations about Benina's plan. But Benina stood her ground, her voice respectful but unyielding. Finally, Gallion sighed and nodded, though her weathered face remained worried. Young Keel woke during this exchange and immediately protested when he realized Benina was planning to leave. She knelt beside him and spoke gently, explaining whatever she needed to explain in their language. The boy's face was troubled, but he nodded reluctantly. Then he looked at Lucas and said something in Apache that made Benina's expression soften. "He says you must keep my blanket to remind you to stay warm and stay safe," she translated, "and to bring it back when you return so he knows you survived." Lucas felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. He nodded to the boy. "Tell him I promise. I will take very good care of it, and I will return it personally." They prepared to leave as the sun climbed higher. Gallion packed food for their journey, dried meat and pemmican, and some kind of flatbread. Benina gathered her own supplies efficiently, including a knife, a smaller medicine bundle, and a water skin. She changed from her beaded dress into more practical traveling clothes, deerskin leggings and a tunic that would allow easier movement through rough terrain. Lucas stood, testing his balance and finding it mostly steady. The blanket was still wrapped around his shoulders, and he hesitated before folding it carefully and tying it to his belt. He saw Benina watching him and felt compelled to say something about the blanket's significance, about what it meant to him that she had shared something she had made with her own hands. "This blanket," he began, then paused, searching for the right words. "Where I come from, a gift like this is not given lightly. It means something. I want you to know I understand that, and I will honor it." Benina's dark eyes held his for a moment, and he thought he saw something warm in their depths before she looked away. "It is just a blanket," she said, but her voice carried a note that suggested it was more than that to her as well. "It will keep you warm. That is what matters." They said their farewells to Gallion and Keel. The older woman gripped, Lucas's good arm and spoke to him in Apache, her tone making it clear she was giving him some kind of instruction or warning. Benina translated. She says, "If you allow harm to come to me, she will find you and make you wish the marshal's men had caught you first." Lucas could not help but smile slightly despite the seriousness of the threat. "Tell her I will protect your granddaughter with my life. She has my word." Gallion seemed satisfied with this response when Benina translated. Keel hugged Benina fiercely, and she ruffled his hair with obvious affection before standing and leading the way out of the cave. The journey that followed was unlike anything Lucas had experienced. Benina moved through the wilderness with a grace and confidence that made his own woodcraft seem clumsy by comparison. She knew every game trail, every hidden path, every source of water. She could read the forest like Lucas might read a book, interpreting signs he could not even see. They traveled mostly in silence for the first few hours, Benina setting a steady pace that was challenging but manageable with Lucas's injury. She checked on him periodically, making sure he was keeping up and that his wound was not bleeding through the bandage. Her concern was practical rather than emotional, but Lucas appreciated it nonetheless. Around midday, they stopped to rest near a small stream. Benina refilled their water skins while Lucas sat on a fallen log, catching his breath. The exertion was taking more out of him than he wanted to admit, but he was determined not to slow her down. She returned and handed him some of the pemmican, then sat nearby. "Tell me about yourself, Lucas Dawson," she said abruptly. "Why does a white rancher care about justice for Apache people?" Lucas chewed thoughtfully before answering. "I do not know that I am particularly noble," he admitted. "I grew up on a ranch east of Irica, working cattle with my father until he passed 3 years ago. I have seen how the land grabbers operate, how they use the law and corruption to take what they want. It has always bothered me, but I never did anything about it beyond running my own ranch honestly." He paused, remembering the night in the saloon that had changed everything. "When I saw those documents, saw the marshal and the railroad baron planning to claim land they had no right to, I could not walk away and pretend I had not seen it. Maybe that makes me a fool." "Maybe it makes you honest," Benina replied. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "My family once owned much land along the river. Good land for growing, for living. The treaties promised it would remain ours, but the treaties meant nothing when white men decided they wanted it instead." There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact, but Lucas felt the weight of it nonetheless. "I am sorry," he said. "I know those words do not fix anything, but I mean them." Benina looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw a complexity of emotion in her eyes. "You are not responsible for what others of your people have done, but you are choosing to act against injustice now. That matters." They continued their journey, and as the day wore on, they began to talk more. Benina told him about her life, about growing up moving between the reservation and the traditional lands her people still tried to maintain. She spoke of her mother, who had died when Benina was 15, and of her father, who had been killed 2 years later trying to stop raiders from stealing their horses. "After that, it was just my grandmother and me," she said. "And Keel, whose parents died from sickness last winter. We take care of each other. That is what family does." Lucas shared his own history about his mother who had died giving birth to a stillborn daughter when he was 10, about his father who had worked himself to death trying to make the ranch prosper. "I have been alone for 3 years now," he said. "I suppose I have gotten used to it, but there are times when the silence of that empty house is harder than any work." Benina nodded understanding. Loneliness is its own kind of hunger. They made camp that night in a sheltered spot among the rocks, not risking a fire in case the marshal's men were still searching. Lucas wrapped himself in the blanket Benina had given him, and she used another from her pack. They sat close together for warmth, their backs against a large boulder looking up at the stars. "The blanket really is beautiful," Lucas said quietly. "The pattern, the way you wove it. How long did it take to make?" "Many weeks," Benina replied. "I gathered the wool myself, cleaned it, spun it, dyed it with plants I collected. The weaving itself took more than a month. Each blanket tells a story through its patterns. This one was meant to represent the journey from winter to spring, darkness to light, hardship to hope." Lucas looked down at the blanket with new appreciation, understanding now the depth of skill and time that had gone into its creation. "And you just gave it to a stranger. You were cold and wounded," Benina said simply. "What good is a blanket if not to warm someone who needs warmth?" But Lucas sensed there was more to it than that, a significance she was not expressing. He shifted slightly to look at her, her face pale in the starlight. "In my family, we do not have much tradition left," he said carefully. "But my grandmother, before she died, told me that when a woman gives a man something she has made with her own hands, it is a token of regard, a way of saying she sees worth in him." Benina was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps Apache women are not so different," she finally said, her voice soft. "Perhaps I saw something in you worth saving, worth warming." Lucas's heart beat faster. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. Her fingers were calloused from work but graceful, and they curled around his own. They sat like that for a while, hands joined under the vast canopy of stars. "I do not want this to end when we reach Eureka," Lucas said eventually. "These past 2 days, talking with you, being near you, it has felt like waking up from a long sleep I did not know I was in." Benina turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Lucas replied. "I know you are brave and skilled and compassionate. I know you make me want to be better than I am. I know that when I look at you, I see someone I could spend a lifetime learning more about and never grow tired of it." She drew in a breath, and he saw the conflict in her expression. "A white rancher and an Apache woman," she said. "The world would not accept such a pairing easily." "Then the world can learn to accept it, or it can go to hell," Lucas said with sudden fierceness. "I am tired of letting fear and prejudice dictate what is right. If you feel even a fraction of what I am feeling, then we owe it to ourselves to see where this could lead." Benina's free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I feel it," she whispered. "From the moment I saw you fall into our camp, wounded and brave enough to warn us even in your pain, I felt something. I told myself it was just the healer's care for her patient, but I knew it was more." Lucas turned his head to kiss her palm, a gentle gesture that made her breath catch. "Then we will face whatever comes together." She leaned in and kissed him then, soft and tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Lucas wrapped his good arm around her, pulling her closer, careful of his injured shoulder. The blanket cocooned them both as the kiss deepened, and Lucas felt something fundamental shift in his chest. Like a piece of himself he had not known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Benina rested her forehead against his. "This is complicated," she said, but she was smiling. "The best things usually are," Lucas replied. They held each other as the night grew colder, the blanket wrapped around both of them now, sharing warmth and beginning to share dreams of a future neither had imagined possible before. Eventually they dozed, still holding each other, safer together than either would have been alone. The next morning brought new challenges. They were getting closer to Eureka now, entering territory where they might encounter the marshal's men or other travelers. Benina became more cautious, scouting ahead and choosing their path with even greater care. Lucas followed her lead, trusting her judgment completely. Late in the afternoon, they crested a ridge that gave them a view of the valley below. Eureka lay in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings that had grown up around the gold rush and stayed on as a supply hub. But between them and the town, Benina spotted something that made her pull Lucas down behind cover. "Riders," she said quietly, pointing. 4 of them, searching the area systematically. Lucas peered carefully over the rocks and recognized one of the horses. "That is the marshal's deputy, Jackson. The others must be hired guns." They watched the men for several minutes, trying to determine their pattern. The riders were being thorough, checking every ravine and stand of trees. Eventually, they would work their way up to this ridge. "We cannot go forward without being seen," Benina said thoughtfully. "And we cannot stay here." Lucas thought hard, considering their options. "There is another way into Eureka from the south. It means going around, adding a full day to our journey, but it would let us avoid these men." "Then we go south," Benina decided. She started to move, but Lucas caught her arm. "Wait. I want you to know that when we get to Eureka, when I give my testimony to the federal marshal, I am also going to make it clear that you helped me. That you deserve recognition and thanks, not just from me but officially." Benina shook her head. "That is not necessary. I do not want attention from authorities." "Maybe not," Lucas persisted, "but you deserve justice as much as anyone. If my testimony can help bring down the territorial marshal, it might also help protect your people's land claims. Let me try to do this for you." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We will see what happens. For now, let us focus on getting you there alive." They backtracked carefully and began the longer route south. The detour took them through some spectacular country, following a river canyon that cut through the mountains. At one point, they had to wade across the river itself, the cold water reaching Lucas's chest and making his wounded shoulder ache fiercely. Benina stayed close, ready to help if he faltered, but he made it across on his own. That evening they allowed themselves a small fire, hidden in a deep ravine where the smoke would disperse before rising above the rim. Benina checked Lucas's wound again, pleased that it continued to heal cleanly. She prepared a simple meal from their dwindling supplies, and they ate in companionable silence. "Tell me about your ranch," Benina said as they finished eating. "What is it like?" Lucas smiled, appreciating her interest. "It is not large, maybe 200 acres of decent grazing land and some timber. The house is small, just 3 rooms, but it has a good stone fireplace and a porch where you can watch the sun rise over the mountains. I run about 50 head of cattle, enough to make a living but not enough to get rich. There is a creek that runs through the property year-round, and in spring the meadow fills with wildflowers." He paused, suddenly able to picture Benina there, standing on that porch or walking through that meadow, and the image felt so right it made his chest ache. It could be more, though. The land could support a larger herd, and there is room to build on, make the house bigger. I have just never had a reason to expand, never had anyone to share it with. Until now, Benina said softly, and it was not a question. Until now, Lucas agreed. He reached out and took her hand again, marveling at how natural it already felt. I know we have not known each other long. I know there are 100 practical problems we will have to solve. But Benina, I am falling in love with you. It is too fast and probably too soon and definitely too complicated, but it is the truth. Benina's eyes glistened in the firelight. In my people's tradition, sometimes the strongest bonds form quickly, like lightning that strikes and changes everything in an instant. My grandmother told me that she knew she would marry my grandfather the day she met him. He was a warrior from another band, and they had only a few hours together before he had to leave. But when he came back 3 months later to ask for her, she was waiting and ready to say yes. "How long were they together?" Lucas asked. 40 years until he died," Benina said. "And my grandmother still speaks of him as if he were in the next room. That is the kind of love I want, the kind that burns bright and lasts long." "Then let us have that," Lucas said, "together." She leaned in and kissed him again, and this time there was a promise in it, a commitment being silently made. Lucas pulled the blanket around both of them, wrapping them together in the warmth she had created with her own hands. It felt symbolic somehow, this blanket becoming not just a source of physical warmth, but a representation of the bond forming between them. They talked long into the night, sharing more of their histories and their hopes. Benina spoke of wanting to help preserve her people's ways, to teach young ones like Keel the old skills and knowledge. Lucas talked about his dream of running a ranch that operated fairly, that provided employment without exploitation. They discovered they both loved the early morning hours when the world was still quiet. Both preferred autumn to any other season. Both believed that actions mattered more than words. "If we do this, if we build a life together, it will not be easy," Benina said seriously. "There will be people in Ireka and beyond who will hate us for it, who will see us as traitors to our own people or worse." "I know," Lucas replied, "but there will also be people who understand, who support us, and we will have each other, which matters more than the approval of bigots." "You are sure?" she asked, needing to hear it again. "I have never been more sure of anything," Lucas said firmly. "Benina, you saved my life, but more than that, you have given me a reason to want that life to be worth living. Whatever comes, we will face it together." She nodded, satisfied and settled against him. They slept wrapped in the blanket and each other's arms, and Lucas woke several times just to reassure himself that she was real, that this was not some fever dream brought on by his injury. The next day they reached the southern approach to Ireka, a wagon road that came up from the mining camps in the mountains. They saw other travelers now, miners and freight wagons, and had to be more circumspect about being seen together. The reality of the prejudices they would face was already becoming apparent in the looks they received. "Perhaps I should wait outside town while you go in," Benina suggested. "Complete your business and then come back for me." Lucas immediately shook his head. "No. We go in together, or not at all. I will not hide you as if I am ashamed because I am anything but." Benina squeezed his hand gratefully, and they continued into town together, ignoring the stares and whispers. Lucas led them directly to the federal land office, hoping to find someone who could tell him how to contact the federal marshal. The clerk at the land office was a nervous young man who kept glancing at Benina with poorly concealed unease. Lucas ignored it and stated his business firmly. "I need to contact Federal Marshal Henry Blackstone. It is a matter of urgency regarding corruption in the Territorial Marshal's office." The clerk's eyes widened. "Marshal Blackstone is actually in town right now, staying at the Ireka Hotel." "But sir, I should warn you, making accusations against Marshal Cobb is dangerous business." "I am aware of the danger," Lucas said dryly. "That is why I need to speak with Marshal Blackstone immediately." "Where is the hotel?" The clerk gave directions, and Lucas thanked him. As they left the land office, Benina spoke quietly. "Cobb is the Territorial Marshal's name. I did not know it before." "Thomas Cobb," Lucas confirmed. "He has been in power for 5 years, and from what I have heard, he has gotten rich while the people he is supposed to protect have gotten poorer. This land deal I witnessed is just one of many, I suspect." They found the Ireka Hotel easily enough, a 2-story building with a restaurant on the ground floor. Lucas asked for Marshal Blackstone and was told he was having dinner. They found him in the restaurant, a gray-haired man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bearing. Lucas approached his table directly. "Marshal Blackstone, my name is Lucas Dawson, and I have information about illegal activities by Territorial Marshal Cobb. May I speak with you?" Blackstone studied Lucas, taking in his obviously injured shoulder and trail-worn appearance. Then his gaze moved to Benina. His expression gave nothing away. "Sit down, both of you. Tell me what you know." They sat, and Lucas laid out everything he had witnessed in the saloon 5 days ago. He described the documents, the conversation, the specific parcels of land along the Klamath River that were being fraudulently claimed for the railroad. He named everyone present, including several prominent businessmen and the railroad representative. Blackstone listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Lucas finished, the marshal sat back and regarded him thoughtfully. "That is quite an accusation. You understand that if you are lying or mistaken, you could face serious legal consequences." "I understand," Lucas said firmly. "And I am neither lying nor mistaken. I know what I saw and heard." "And why have you not come forward sooner?" Blackstone asked. "Because Cobb's men have been trying to kill me for the past 5 days, Lucas replied. "They chased me out of town and have been hunting me ever since. I would be dead if not for Miss Solace here and her family." Blackstone turned his attention to Benina. "You are Apache?" "Yes," Benina said, meeting his gaze steadily. "My family camps in the traditional territories. We found Mr. Dawson wounded and fleeing for his life. We provided shelter and medicine, and I guided him back to Irica so he could report what he witnessed." "That was brave of you," Blackstone said, and he seemed to mean it. "I know tensions between settlers and the Apache bands in this region are high. You took a risk helping a white man." "I took a risk helping someone who needed help and who was trying to do the right thing," Benina corrected. "His skin color was less important than his character." A slight smile crossed Blackstone's face. "Well said." He turned back to Lucas. "I will need you to give a formal statement in writing, and I will need to verify your story, which means investigating quietly before Cobb realizes what is happening. Are you willing to stay in town while this unfolds?" "I am," Lucas said. "Though I will need protection. Cobb's men will try to kill me if they find out I am here." "I can arrange for you to stay at the boarding house next door," Blackstone said. "The owner is trustworthy, and I will make sure you have protection." He glanced at Benina. "Will you be staying as well?" Benina looked at Lucas, a silent question in her eyes. He reached out and took her hand openly, not caring who saw. "She will be staying with me if she is willing. We are together." Blackstone's eyebrows rose slightly, but he merely nodded. "As you wish. I will make the arrangements." Over the next 3 days, Lucas gave his formal statement multiple times, going over every detail of what he had witnessed. Blackstone proved to be thorough and intelligent, bringing in additional federal investigators to verify Lucas's claims. They found the documents Lucas had described in the railroad office, exactly where he said they would be. They interviewed others who had been in the saloon that night, pressuring them until a few corroborated Lucas's story. Meanwhile, Lucas and Benina stayed in a small room at the boarding house, chaperoned by the strict but fair landlady, Mrs. Henderson. She raised an eyebrow at their arrangement, but said nothing judgmental, providing them with 2 adjoining rooms that had a connecting door they could leave open for propriety's sake. During those days, Lucas and Benina continued to learn about each other. They took walks together in the early morning before the town fully woke, talking about everything and nothing. Benina taught him a few words in Apache, and he taught her some of the cowboy songs his father had sung. They made plans for the future, tentative at first but growing more concrete as their confidence in each other deepened. "I want to meet your grandmother and cousin properly," Lucas said one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. "To ask permission to court you officially the way it should be done," Benina smiled. "My grandmother will want to test you, make sure you are worthy. She will not make it easy." "I would not expect her to," Lucas replied. "You are worth any test she could devise." On the fourth day, Marshal Blackstone made his move. He arrested Territorial Marshal Cobb and 3 of his deputies on charges of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy. The arrests created a sensation in Irica, with people taking sides and arguments breaking out in the streets. But Blackstone had his evidence solid, and the case against Cobb was strong. Lucas testified before a federal magistrate who had been brought in from Sacramento. His testimony was clear and unwavering, and with the corroborating evidence Blackstone had gathered, it was devastating. Cobb's legal counsel tried to discredit Lucas, suggesting he had invented the story for personal gain, but Lucas held firm. When they tried to attack his character by pointing out his relationship with Benina, suggesting it proved his sympathies lay with Indians over white settlers, Lucas responded with quiet fury. "My relationship with Miss Solace proves only that I am capable of recognizing quality and character, regardless of heritage," he said, "which is apparently more than can be said for some people in this room. She is worth 10 of most men I know, and I am honored that she has chosen to stand beside me." The courtroom buzzed with reaction, but the magistrate banged his gavel for order. "The personal life of the witness is not on trial here. Do you have any further questions about the actual events Mr. Dawson witnessed?" They did not, or at least none that could shake his testimony. When Lucas was finally dismissed, he walked out of the courthouse to find Benina waiting outside. She had been barred from the courtroom, though she had tried to enter, and the frustration on her face was evident. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "It is done," Lucas said. "The magistrate is ruling tomorrow, but Blackstone thinks we have it. Cobb is going to prison and the land deal is being voided." Relief flooded Benina's face, and she embraced him right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw. Lucas held her tightly, aware of the stares and whispers but not caring about those either. They had done it. They had stood up to corruption and won. That evening, Marshal Blackstone bought them dinner at the hotel restaurant to celebrate. He toasted them both, acknowledging not just Lucas's bravery in coming forward but also Benina's courage in helping him. "I have been investigating Cobb for months," Blackstone admitted, "but I could never get the evidence I needed. You handed it to me, Mr. Dawson. The federal government owes you a debt of gratitude." "I was just doing what was right," Lucas said, "but I do have a favor to ask. The land along the Klamath River that Cobb was trying to steal, some of it belongs to Miss Solace's people by treaty. Can you make sure those claims are honored?" Blackstone nodded seriously. "I will do what I can. The federal government has not always been good about honoring treaties with the tribes, but with Cobb out of power and his corruption exposed, there may be an opportunity to correct some injustices. I will make sure the right people in Washington hear about this." "Thank you," Benina said quietly. "That means more than you might know." After dinner, Lucas and Benina walked back to the boarding house slowly, savoring the evening air and the sense of accomplishment. Irica seemed different now, less threatening, and Lucas found himself thinking about the future with excitement rather than anxiety. "Come with me tomorrow," he said to Benina as they reached the boarding house. "Out to my ranch. I want you to see it, to tell me if you can imagine making a life there." "I can imagine making a life anywhere as long as you are part of it," Benina replied. "But yes, I want to see your home, our home perhaps." They borrowed horses from the livery stable the next morning and rode out to Lucas's ranch. It took most of the morning to get there, following a trail that led east into the foothills. When they finally crested the last ridge and the ranch came into view below, Lucas felt a familiar sense of coming home mixed with new nervousness about what Benina would think. The ranch house was indeed small, a simple structure of logs and planks with a stone chimney on one end. The barn was in good repair, and the pastures beyond showed green with spring grass. Cattle grazed peacefully, and Lucas could see that his hired hand, old Charlie Mitchell, had kept things running smoothly in his absence. They rode down to the house and Charlie came out to meet them, rifle in hand until he recognized Lucas. "Boss, we heard you were dead or run off by the marshal's men. Good to see you alive." "Good to be alive, Charlie," Lucas said, dismounting. "This is Miss Benina Solace. She is the reason I am alive. Benina, this is Charlie Mitchell, who has been helping me run this place for the past 2 years." Charlie tipped his hat to Benina, his weathered face showing surprise but no hostility. "Madam, any friend of Lucas is welcome here." "More than a friend, Charlie," Lucas said quietly. "Miss Solace and I are courting. I hope to convince her to marry me if she will have me." Charlie's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, but after a moment he nodded slowly. "Well then, congratulations to you both. That is right fine news." They spent the afternoon showing Benina around the ranch. She walked through the house, examining everything with interest, and Lucas watched anxiously for her reaction. It was sparse and masculine, clearly lacking a woman's touch, but it was solid and well built. "There is space to add more rooms," Lucas explained. "And the kitchen could be expanded. I know it is not much right now, but it could be improved." Benina turned to him with amusement in her eyes. "Lucas, I have spent most of my life living in a wickiup that could fit inside this kitchen. Your house seems like a palace to me, and yes, I can see us here. I can see children running in that meadow and a garden beside the house and a life built on honest work and love." Lucas felt his heart swell. He pulled her close, kissing her softly. "Then marry me, Benina. I know it is fast and I know there will be challenges, but I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, Lucas saw Charlie watching from near the barn, a smile on his grizzled face. The old cowboy gave them a thumbs up and went back to his work, leaving them to their moment. The next week was a whirlwind. Lucas formally proposed to Benina in front of her grandmother and cousin, who had come to Eureka after hearing the news about Cobb's arrest. Gallion put Lucas through several tests, making him demonstrate his shooting ability, his horse skills, and his knowledge of living off the land. She interrogated him about his intentions and his ability to provide for and protect Benina. Lucas passed every test, though he suspected Gallion had already made up her mind before he began. Finally, the old woman nodded her approval. "You may marry my granddaughter," she said through Benina's translation. "You are brave and honest and you clearly love her. That is enough." Young Keel was thrilled, chattering excitedly about coming to visit the ranch and learning to be a cowboy. Lucas solemnly promised to teach him everything he knew, and the boy beamed. They decided on a simple wedding, combining elements of both cultures. A sympathetic minister agreed to perform a Christian ceremony, while Gallion conducted traditional Apache blessings. They held it at the ranch, with Charlie and a few of Lucas's neighbors attending along with Gallion and Keel. Marshal Blackstone came as well, standing as witness. Benina wore a dress she had made herself, white doeskin decorated with beautiful beadwork that had taken her countless hours. Lucas wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed by Mrs. Henderson. And during the ceremony, They stood together wrapped in the blanket Benina had made, the one that had kept Lucas warm during his flight and recovery, the one that had come to symbolize their bond. "This blanket represents our union," Benina explained to the gathered witnesses. "It is woven from many threads, just as our marriage will weave together two lives, two cultures, two hearts. It has already kept us warm through cold nights. May it always remind us of the warmth we bring to each other." Lucas wrapped it around both their shoulders, pulling Benina close. "In love everlasting," he said, the words feeling right and true. "From this day forward we face everything together, wrapped in the warmth of the love we share." They spoke their vows, exchanged simple rings that Lucas had commissioned from the town blacksmith, and were pronounced husband and wife. The small gathering cheered, and Charlie produced a fiddle from somewhere and played dancing music. They celebrated into the evening with food and drink and laughter. As the sun set and their guests began to depart, Lucas and Benina stood on the porch of their home, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to purple. Benina leaned against Lucas, and he wrapped his arms around her, the blanket still draped over both their shoulders. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever imagined possible," Benina replied. "When I pulled you from that ravine, wounded and desperate, I never dreamed it would lead to this." "You saved my life in more ways than one," Lucas said. "You gave me not just breathe but purpose, not just survival but a reason to thrive. I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that gift." "You already are," Benina assured him. She turned in his arms to face him. "We will build something good here, Lucas. Something that lasts. Our love will be like this blanket, woven strong and meant to endure." They went inside together, closing the door on the darkening world, wrapped in each other and in the promise of all their tomorrows. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm over the following months. Benina proved to be a natural rancher's wife, though she brought her own skills and knowledge to the work. She started a garden using techniques her grandmother had taught her, growing both traditional Apache crops and the vegetables Lucas was familiar with. She taught him about medicinal plants, and soon they had a thriving herb garden as well. Gallion and Keel came to stay with them often, and Benina was grateful to have her family close. Keel followed Charlie around like a shadow, learning cowboy skills with enthusiasm. The boy had a natural talent with horses, and Charlie predicted he would be an excellent wrangler someday. The newlyweds faced prejudice, as they had known they would. Some of Lucas's neighbors refused to associate with them anymore, and there were ugly incidents in town when they went for supplies. But there were also unexpected allies. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house became a staunch defender, shaming anyone who spoke ill of them in her hearing. Charlie never wavered in his loyalty. And Marshal Blackstone, before he left Eureka to return to Sacramento, made it clear that the federal government considered Lucas a hero and his wife a woman of courage and honor. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the town's opinion began to shift. When Benina's medical knowledge saved the life of a rancher's child who had fallen ill, word spread. When Lucas loaned money to a neighbor in trouble, asking no interest and setting easy terms, people took note. The couple lived their values visibly, treating everyone with respect and conducting their business with integrity. A year after their marriage, Benina gave Lucas joyful news. She was pregnant. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and demanded he put her down before they both fell over. That night they lay in bed together, his hand on her still flat belly, talking about their hopes for their child. "Boy or girl, it does not matter," Lucas said. "As long as the baby is healthy and you come through safely." "I am strong," Benina assured him, "and my grandmother will be here to help when the time comes. Women in my family have been birthing babies for countless generations. Their son was born in early spring, during a rainstorm that washed the world clean. Gallion attended the birth, along with Mrs. Henderson, who had insisted on being there. Lucas paced outside, more nervous than he had ever been facing danger, until he heard the baby's cry. Then Benina's voice called for him, and he rushed inside to find her tired but glowing, holding a small bundle. "Meet your son," she said, smiling. Lucas took the baby carefully, overwhelmed by the tiny, perfect features. The boy had a shock of dark hair in his mother's eyes, and Lucas felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is beautiful," he whispered, "just like his mother." They named him James, after Lucas's father, with the Apache name Gallion gave him in a traditional blessing ceremony. Little James was welcomed by both sides of his heritage, and he grew up knowing he was loved. 2 years later, a daughter followed, strong, lunged, and fierce from the moment she arrived. They named her Sarah, with the Apache name meaning dancing water because she seemed always in motion. Benina laughed that their daughter had inherited her father's stubbornness and her mother's determination, a combination that would make her unstoppable. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Benina's joint management. They expanded gradually, buying adjacent land when it became available, always careful to respect the boundaries of territory that belonged to the Apache bands. Lucas became known as a fair dealer, someone whose word was good and whose prices were honest. Benina's medicines were sought after, and she taught other women her knowledge, both Apache and white. They added rooms to the house as their family grew, building on exactly as Lucas had envisioned. The main room featured a large fireplace, and above it they hung the blanket Benina had made, the one that had wrapped them in warmth during those first dangerous days and at their wedding. It remained a symbol of their love, and they would sometimes take it down on cold nights, wrapping themselves and their children in it while they told stories by the fire. Keel grew into a young man under their roof, considering Lucas as much an uncle as Benina was his cousin. He became an excellent horseman and eventually started his own small herd with Lucas's help. Gallion lived with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by the family she had helped protect and nurture. Marshal Blackstone kept his promise about the land claims. The federal government, embarrassed by the corruption Cobb's case had revealed, made an effort to honor treaty obligations more faithfully. It was not perfect, and injustices continued, but some progress was made. Benina's people were able to keep some of their traditional lands along the Klamath River, and Lucas and Benina worked to build bridges between the Apache community and the white settlers, fostering understanding where they could. Their marriage became a quiet example that love could transcend cultural boundaries. Other mixed couples in the region found courage in Lucas and Benina's success, and gradually, the community became more accepting. It was slow change, and there were always those who disapproved, but the Dawson Ranch became known as a place where everyone was welcome regardless of background. As the years passed, Lucas and Benina's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, as any couple did, but they had learned to communicate honestly and to value each other's perspectives. Lucas came to understand Apache culture more deeply, learning the language and the customs. Benina became comfortable in both worlds, able to navigate white society while maintaining her cultural identity. They had 4 children in all: James, Sarah, and then twins, a boy and girl they named Matthew and Grace. The house rang with laughter and sometimes tears, with the chaos of childhood and the warmth of family love. Lucas would sometimes stop in the middle of his work, look around at his wife and children, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for how his life had turned out. On their 10th anniversary, Benina made Lucas a new blanket, this one even larger and more intricate than the first. The pattern told the story of their decade together, incorporating symbols of their children, their land, their struggles and triumphs. Lucas was moved to tears when she presented it to him. "The first blanket brought us together," Benina explained. "This one celebrates all we have built. May it warm us for the next 10 years and all the years after." They wrapped themselves in it that night, as they had so many times before, holding each other close. "I love you more now than I did the day I married you," Lucas said. "I did not think that was possible, but every day with you makes my heart fuller." "Love that lasts is love that grows," Benina replied. "We tend it like a garden, give it care and attention, and it flourishes. I am grateful every day that you fell into my life, wounded and brave and stubborn. And I am grateful every day that you chose to help me, to trust me, to love me," Lucas said. As their children grew, Lucas and Benina began to think about legacy, about what they would leave behind. They had built a successful ranch, yes, but more importantly, they had built a family and a community that was richer for their efforts. They had shown that different cultures could blend and strengthen each other rather than clash. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved learning and eventually went east to study law, determined to fight for justice as his father had. Sarah became a teacher, educating children from both Apache and white families. Matthew took over much of the ranch work, showing a natural talent for animal husbandry. Grace developed her mother's gift for medicine and healing, studying both traditional Apache remedies and modern medical practices. Lucas and Benina watched their children flourish with pride, knowing they had given them strong roots and broad wings. They had taught them to honor both sides of their heritage, to stand up for what was right, and to lead with love rather than hate. On a summer evening in their 25th year of marriage, Lucas and Benina sat on their porch as the sun set, just as they had on their wedding night. Their hair was graying now, and their bodies showed the wear of hard work and full lives, but their love remained as strong as ever. "If I could go back to that night in the saloon," Lucas mused, "knowing everything that would follow, the danger and the struggle, I would not change a single thing. Every hardship was worth it to have you, to have this life." "There is no going back," Benina said with a smile, "only forward. And I am excited to see what our future still holds." "More grandchildren, I hope," Lucas said. James had recently announced his engagement to a young woman he had met at university. "Many grandchildren," Benina agreed, "and many more years together, wrapped in love everlasting." They stood and went inside, Lucas holding the door for his wife as he had for 25 years. The blanket that had started it all still hung above the fireplace, its colors slightly faded now, but its weave still strong. It had kept them warm through countless cold nights, had wrapped their children, had been present at every important moment of their marriage. Lucas took it down and draped it around both their shoulders, pulling Benina close. "Do you remember what I said at our wedding? That this blanket would always remind us of the warmth we bring to each other." "I remember," Benina said, leaning into him. "It is still true," Lucas continued. "Every day you warm my heart, my soul, my life. You are my home, Benina, not this house or this land, but you. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Tears sparkled in Benina's eyes. "And you are mine, my partner, my love, my home. We have built something beautiful together, Lucas, something that will last long after we are gone." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in the blanket and in each other, the fire crackling softly, the house quiet around them. Outside, the ranch they had built together lay peaceful under the stars. Inside, their hearts beat in rhythm, two lives woven together as tightly as the threads in the blanket that symbolized their love. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. They celebrated grandchildren's births and mourned the losses of friends. They saw their community continue to evolve, with understanding between cultures growing, however slowly. They watched their children build their own lives and families, carrying forward the values Lucas and Benina had instilled. Charlie passed away at the age of 78, having become like family to them all. Keel, now a successful rancher himself, brought his own children to visit regularly. The Dawson Ranch remained a gathering place, a symbol of what could be achieved when love and respect bridged divides. Lucas and Benina grew old together gracefully, their love remaining the foundation of everything they did. They still took walks in the early morning when their aging bodies allowed it. They still talked late into the night, never running out of things to say to each other. They still wrapped themselves in that first blanket sometimes, remembering the young people they had been and marveling at all they had become. When Lucas was 72 and Benina 70, they sat their children and grandchildren down and told them the full story of how they had met. The younger grandchildren had heard pieces, but now Lucas and Benina told it completely. From the bullet that had driven Lucas into Benina's camp to the blanket she had wrapped around him, to their flight through the wilderness and the love that had grown between them. "Your grandmother saved my life," Lucas said, his voice still strong despite his years. "But more than that, she taught me what it means to truly live. She showed me that courage is not just facing physical danger, but also standing up for what you believe is right even when the world tells you you are wrong." "Your grandfather gave me hope," Benina added. "In a time when my people had lost so much, he showed me that there were still good people in the world, that bridges could be built between cultures, that love was stronger than hate." Young James, their eldest grandson and named for his father, spoke up. "Tell us about the blanket again, grandmother, the one you made." Benina smiled and gestured to the blanket hanging above the fireplace. That blanket was meant to represent the journey from darkness to light, from hardship to hope. "When I gave it to your grandfather, I did not know we would fall in love. But I think perhaps my heart knew before my mind did. When I wrapped him in that blanket, I was already beginning to wrap him in my love. And when I accepted it," Lucas continued, "when I felt its warmth and saw the care she had put into making it, I think I was already beginning to fall in love with her. Later, at our wedding, when we wrapped ourselves together in it, it became a symbol of our commitment. We were no longer two separate people, but one unit, facing the world together." Their daughter Sarah, now a middle-aged woman with children of her own, wiped tears from her eyes. "You have given us such a beautiful legacy. Not just this ranch or the family name, but the example of how to love well, how to live with integrity. That is all any parent can hope for," Benina said. "That their children will take what they have learned and build something even better." Lucas reached over and took Benina's hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of 50 years of practice. "The greatest adventure of my life was not the danger and excitement of those early days," he said. "It was the everyday magic of waking up beside this woman for 50 years. It was watching our children grow, watching our grandchildren learn and play, building a life together one day at a time." "Love is not just the passionate beginning," Benina agreed. "It is the choosing to stay, to work through difficulties, to celebrate joys together. It is wrapping each other in warmth when the world is cold, supporting each other when times are hard, rejoicing together when blessings come." They passed the original blanket around the room, letting each family member hold it and feel its texture. It was worn now, some of the colors faded, a few small repairs visible where it had been mended over the years. but it was still strong, still whole, still beautiful in its own way. Like our marriage, Lucas joked when the blanket made its way back to him and Benina. A little worn, carefully mended, but still serving its purpose. Everyone laughed, and the evening continued with more stories and memories, with grandchildren playing and adults talking. Lucas and Benina sat in the middle of it all, surrounded by the family they had created, the love they had nurtured. As the evening wound down and family members began to head home or to the guest rooms that had been added over the years, Lucas and Benina found themselves alone on the porch again, watching the stars come out. "A good life," Lucas said softly. "The best life," Benina agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, the blanket wrapped around both their shoulders. The night was cool, but they were warm. The world could be harsh, but they had each other. They had faced every challenge together, celebrated every victory together, and would continue to do so for whatever time they had left. "I love you," Lucas said, words he had spoken countless times, but that never lost their meaning. "I love you," Benina replied, as she always did. They went inside together, moving slowly now with age but still moving together. The house settled into quiet as they prepared for bed, a routine perfected over 50 years. They lay down together in the bed they had shared all these years, and Lucas pulled Benina close, fitting together as they always had. "Sleep well, my love," he whispered. "And you, my heart," she replied. They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had been since that first night in the cave when everything was uncertain and dangerous, but love was already beginning to bloom. The blanket lay folded at the foot of their bed, ready to provide warmth if the night grew cold, a constant reminder of the gift that had changed both their lives. The seasons turned, and Lucas and Benina moved into their 70s together. They slowed down, as was natural, but their spirits remained strong. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the grandchildren play, telling stories, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of days well lived. Lucas passed away first, peacefully in his sleep at age 76, with Benina holding his hand. His last words were "thank you for every day." And Benina knew he meant every one of the 51 years they had shared. She mourned him deeply, as was right for a love that had been so profound. But she did not break. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by family, tending her garden, making medicine, telling stories about the man she had loved and the life they had built together. When it was her time, 3 years later, she gathered her children and grandchildren around her bed. She asked for the blanket, the first one she had made, and they wrapped it around her shoulders. She touched its worn fabric with gentle fingers, remembering the young woman she had been when she made it, remembering the wounded cowboy she had wrapped in it, remembering 54 years of love and partnership. "Your grandfather and I proved that love can bridge any divide," she told her gathered family. "We showed that different backgrounds can be strengths rather than weaknesses. We built something that lasted, and it will continue through all of you. Remember that love is always the answer. Always choose love." She closed her eyes then, the blanket warm around her shoulders, and slipped away peacefully, going to join the man who had been her partner, her love, her home. They buried her beside Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading oak tree. The family gathered, Apache and white relations standing together, united in grief and love. They wrapped her body in the blanket before burial, the blanket that had started everything, that had kept them warm through cold nights and hard times, that had symbolized their unbreakable bond. The ranch continued under the management of their children and grandchildren, becoming even more successful and remaining a symbol of what Lucas and Benina had built. The story of the Apache woman who had saved a wounded cowboy and the love that had blossomed between them became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The house still stood, expanded and updated but retaining its essential character. Above the fireplace in the main room, a new blanket hung, one that Benina had made in her later years. It depicted the full story of their love, from their meeting to their wedding to their long life together. It was a masterwork, her finest creation, and it remained as a testament to what they had achieved. Their descendants thrived, carrying forward the values of honesty, integrity, courage, and above all, love. Some became ranchers, some teachers, some lawyers, some doctors. But all of them knew the story of Lucas and Benina, knew that they carried within them the legacy of a love that had transcended boundaries and lasted a lifetime. On the hill where Lucas and Benina were buried, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would sometimes come to sit and talk. Young couples facing their own challenges would visit, drawing strength from the knowledge that Lucas and Benina had faced even greater obstacles and prevailed. The oak tree grew large and strong, its branches spreading wide, providing shade and shelter, much as Lucas and Benina's love had provided shelter for generations. The land they had tended so carefully remained beautiful. The ranch they had built remained prosperous. The family they had created remained close and loving. It was everything they could have hoped for, the full flowering of the seed planted on that dangerous night when a wounded cowboy fell into an Apache camp, and a compassionate woman chose to help him. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, it seemed that whispers of their voices could still be heard on the porch, talking softly, laughing gently, wrapped in love everlasting. The blanket that had warmed them in life continued to warm their memory, and their story continued to inspire, a testament to the truth that love, real love, can overcome any obstacle and create something beautiful that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually inherit the ranch, and they would hear the story too. They would learn about the blanket, about the courage it took to love across cultural divides in 1876, about the life their ancestors had built together. And they would understand that they carried within them not just blood and bone, but values and legacy, the gift of knowing that love, true love, is worth fighting for and worth celebrating every single day. The Dawson Ranch remained for generations, a physical reminder of what Lucas and Benina had accomplished. But more important than the land or the buildings was the spirit they had created, the belief that people of different backgrounds could come together in love and respect, that barriers were meant to be broken down, that courage and compassion could change the world one life at a time. And so the story ended not with sadness, though there was sadness in their passing, but with celebration of a life fully lived, a love fully realized, and a legacy that would continue as long as there were people to remember and honor it. The blanket remained, preserved carefully by the family, a tangible link to that first moment of connection when Benina wrapped Lucas in warmth, and in doing so wrapped them both in a love that would truly last forever.